Thank you very much, and welcome to my talk track. I hope I won't take that long to hold you off from the lunch. So just quickly about me, I'm very passionate open source enthusiast. I love containers, actually. I was back then at Docker when everything has begun and kind of doing the evangelistic work. I've been at Red Hat and actually also at SysTech the last 6 years, where we kind of implemented the runtime security and working together against or together with our competitors like Twistlock and Aqua. And Aqua is going to be quite an interesting one. So in general, I'd like to talk about two problems. So in open source world right now, we identified two main problems. The problem number one is the rising supply chain attacks, which we're having. And for those of you who are familiar with Trivy incident recently, who of you is familiar with that? Have you heard about Trivy in general? Trivy, the open source scanner from, which is part of CNCF and CNCF project and coming from Aqua Security. So basically what happened there, Trivy was, the GitHub repository was compromised via GitHub token. And then malicious artifacts were released in the version, I think, 0.69456. And then, of course, the best part was the whole source code was actually wiped out. So all the stars, everything which Aqua Security had is gone. And that's basically saving at least two problems. Problem number one, of course, is the malicious payload, which all the users of Trivy scanners were using. And the attack was so sophisticated that the actual payload was executed prior to scanning. So the pipelines, the scans for everyone, for security developer teams looks pretty fine, but the malicious attack was already in the background, stealing the credentials. And at the same time, the second one is, of course, the, how would I say it in English, reputational damage. So first of all the stars are gone, and then particularly for Aqua Security, which is actually security company, the damage is quite big. Nevertheless, this is like one of the examples, and I'm going to cover a bit about Chainguard, how and if we were affected or not. But another one, which is kind of considering another supply chain attack, is Shai-Hulud. I mean, who was affected, or like who had issues with Shai-Hulud? I mean, okay.
Impacted, but not actually attacked.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, but basically Shai-Hulud was a kind of sophisticated self-replicating worm attacks, and I think so far it was 3 stages of the attacks. This one, for example, is regarding the light LLM. And basically what it did, it collected all the GitHub tokens and cloud access tokens, and not only it kind of installed those, actually to bypass the security gates of the companies which were kind of affected, it was creating a new GitHub repository with the GitHub tokens, so it could actually create this and send the credentials encrypted to unencrypted to the public repository. And means if it was public, that means that all the credentials were publicly accessible for everyone on GitHub from the affected company. And as you can see, we had like almost 300,000 secrets exposed, and 33,000 something of them were quite unique. And this brings kind of highlights the whole open source problem, which goes to the supply chain security. We're kind of expecting that what we're using is actually matching the source code, what we're getting. But if you look at the whole supply chain and how it's being built, there's actually a lot of attack vectors which can be exploited. Probably some of you do remember the executils incident where the Debian packages were affected. Everything is happening actually during the build pipeline or when the build system, as you can see here, was affected. And of course, source code can be also compromised, but luckily by now it's quite seldom, quite rare, or almost impossible, because we use, of course, two-factor authentication, many IS principles, and then again, one of the best examples was executils back then when the maintainer was, actually contributor was working so long that he gained the trust of the maintainers and then became maintainer. And this was the moment when he pushed the malware and the malware was distributed in the packages. And another one, one of my favorite attacks is actually typo squatting. We all know that by writing some emails, we have the ghost key input, and then we have additional letter which is not part of the initial library, for example. And then this library is probably most likely already pre-created, matching the code, like execution of what actually should be inside, and has some additional bonus extra to it. And even if you use SCA and the Dust tools, it just can bypass this, and then we are releasing and publishing malicious artifacts. And this is basically the summary of the upfront trust issue. So we are scanning using different scanners to scan our artifacts. We expect basically, as from the previous days, that like we just talked recently about binary scan signatures. The fact is that the way how the containers are being scanned right now is a bit different. Everything is dependent on the quality of the metadata of the container. It is dependent definitely on the scanner databases as well. And then, of course, there's a bit discrepancy between CVSS scoring, whether it's going to be high exploitable or not. Because of that, we need to be able to guarantee that the software which we are developing is secure by default. And we will talk a bit later about different compliance frameworks and requirements. But one of my favorite compliance frameworks right now is actually Cyber Resilience Act. I know UK is not part, at least yet, of the European Union, but nevertheless, so everyone who would like to deal or like make business inside European Union and offering product of digital elements, PDE, they need to, to some extent, to be compliant with Cyber Resilience Act. And there are different classes available, class 1, class 2, which kind of indicates how hard the audit will be and whether it will be internal or audit is sufficient for you or external one. And the most interesting part about Cyber Resilience Act that this is basically the first kind of framework which really rigorously enforce and requires the companies to change the way how they're developing software. Like one of those is secure by default. The other one is providing SBOMs, full quality SBOMs, including transitive dependencies, which again kind of does it mean that we need to include into SBOM the dependencies from the build or just the ones which we use. One of the favorite examples of mine is Keycloak. So if anyone is familiar with Keycloak, it's a bit technical, but the issue is when Keycloak is being built, it either uses a lot of components coming from NPM and Maven Central, the libraries, but when the build process is finished, the traces of those libraries are gone, meaning that the code still exists in the Keycloak itself, but when creating a post-mortem SBOM, like scanning the container, those packages or those artifacts are just not visible, but you are affected. This is like quite very interesting example. That's why I chose this one. And of course, if we continue a bit further, we have another problem. The problem number 2 is innovation versus remediation. We all know that if you look at the software development lifecycle, or like SDLC wheel, you know that when the software creation starts, we go and think about like what can we use, who is the product, like the product owner decides which components will it be based on, what will it do, then it comes to the design phase, then the developers start working, testing, deployment, and then of course release, and then the maintenance cycle starts everything from scratch. And I do like to talk about this as a wheel of friction, because everywhere we can see here, with different groups working together, they all have actually one common problem if it comes from security. Those are the CVEs. Like the vulnerabilities needs to be patched. And this is actually where the most resources are being wasted if you look at SDLC. So basically security requirements are coming from security. Question is, are those implemented from the very beginning? Then of course there's compliance planning. Then during the design phase, we need to decide which base images we'll be using, which libraries, et cetera. And once the deployment starts, we will then, for the first time, analyze the CVEs, or like for the vulnerabilities. Then we go into CVE triage, patching before it goes into testing and deployment. And if you look at the modern developer, then we have actually two issues. So there's like the good side and the not so good side. And developers don't like CVE remediation because it takes time. They also don't like image patching because they don't really see it as their responsibility and mostly don't care. I was having a conversation with a big German manufacturer who is also our customer, and it was about Java base image, and they have a lot of Java. And basically, he said to me, "I'm the maintainer of the worldwide or at this company for this Java image, and it was actually a mistake of mine because I patched it for me, then the people saw it, and then he was kind of punished by becoming the maintainer of this Java image, and he doesn't like it because it consumes a lot of his time." And then, of course, SBOM creation verification. Like SBOM is definitely a very different topic because before Cyber Resilience Act, SBOM was not really relevant. And we have different formats. We have the CycloneDX format, which is mostly popular in Europe. Then we have SPDX format, which is coming from the Linux Foundation and mostly focused on licensing topics, where SPDX is more focused on vulnerabilities. But nevertheless, we have a lot of standards. And who is responsible for the SBOM creation? So if it's developer, it's again additional task for them. And who guarantees that the SBOM quality is actually matching what's inside the software itself? And then, of course, last but not least, a dependencies update. But developers likely, like mostly, deliver new features. And this is like kind of a slide which a colleague of mine created to visualize the hidden cost of CVEs. And one can see this from the perspective of one project, one department, product owner perspective, and multiply that by a lot of projects which you currently have. And if you look kind of matching the SDLCs from ideation, design, development, build, there are a lot of dependencies that are coming for the developers and different departments. And if you match this to the compliance requirements, the security requirements, and the developer experience itself, then we can see that basically the time, people, costs, and of course the friction increases dramatically. So since I have only 10 minutes, I will continue how Chainguard is solving those issues. So first of all, we will eliminate the full friction in the SDLC process. Regarding the Trivy and Chainguard examples, we weren't affected by Trivy hack, neither were we affected by Chainguard. Actually, we had to put down the versions from our repository, because we didn't want to confuse the users. And the core difference lies in the way how we build our software. We purposely created distroless Linux, which we called Wolfie or Chainguard OS, and it was created particularly to run for the container workloads. And distroless means, for those who are familiar with distroless, means that it only contains the necessary dependencies which are required to run a particular task. So let's say if I run a web browser, Apache, it is only what's required to run this Apache. Using the traditional multi-purpose Linux distribution for containerized workloads create an issue where we have a lot of transitive dependencies, which are coming with not only additional ballast in terms of the size, but also in terms of vulnerabilities. And Chainguard is building everything from source using our Chainguard factory. So our kind of two offerings right now is the Chainguard containers with over 2,400 open source projects. I mean that everything starting from the kind of base images to application images, AI images is basically offered by us. And then of course, it doesn't make any sense to just create a secure image and then the developer starts again and go to the public sources, NPM, Maven Central, PyPy, and download again those artifacts where we have no guarantee that those are trusted. Because sometimes the artifacts being published, they just created on some laptop of a developer, and we just assumed that everything was safe, like previously with the supply chain slide I showed you. And the reason why we're able to do what we do, providing zero CVE images and malware-free libraries, is because of our Chainguard factory. Basically, we monitor all the open source projects in real time. As soon as there's a vulnerability has been published and the fix is available, we would automatically rebuild not only the images, but all the dependencies and publish those to our registry and make it available to our users. We do, of course, test everything so that API and API capability is not broken. And then, of course, because of the automation, everything is happening lightning fast. So just to summarize, so we are resolving basically all the current challenges which we have. Compliance, and I was just looking up which compliance frameworks are relevant for UKI. So I mentioned, I think, DSPT, DTEC, PRA, and then, of course, we reduce the cost of engineering toil, because once the engineering, like developers, will use zero CVE images and malware libraries, it removes a lot of toil and actually makes them more productive. And then, of course, with the libraries example, it has to prevent malware attacks and accelerate revenue because we're then faster than the competition. So, and just to summarize for the end, we are basically a plug-and-play solution. So our containers are OCI compliant, meaning that there's a basically one-to-one replacement of what we currently use, and there's no friction at all. There's no migration. Maybe I'm just adjusting the Docker file, and everything works from there like it worked before, only with the difference that you have zero CVE, and at the same time you are compliant. And then, of course, same goes for the libraries. If you're already using, most likely you're not allowing you developers to go directly to the public sources, but since you're using obviously an artifact manager internally, everything is basically integrated with your artifact manager. And for developers, there's actually no visibility at all. So they're still using the same names of the libraries, and those are just malware-free because they built by us from source. And at the same time, using us, we can eliminate the typo squatting attack, which I was referring to, because we just won't allow like would register there's a library being requested, which is not really existent. It will just prevent from pulling this library from our sources. And just to give you an example at the end, how it looks like. So this is a screenshot from one of our images. I just took notes as example for JavaScript for the last 6 months, as you can see here. On the right side, there is a kind of a graph of the vulnerabilities which you have at the moment in the Node latest release. And we can see that it has, as of today, 27 critical, 157 high. And usually what I can, as you see, that most companies say, like, we only actually take care about critical and high, and then, of course, differentiate and reprioritize again on exploitable versus non-exploitable. But however, in the recent news, there was a white paper published, I don't remember the name of it, but now with the AI, it's possible now to construct attacks which are actually combining medium and low vulnerabilities, a chain of attack, and those vulnerabilities will actually be important as well. And as you can see on the left side, you can see the Chainguard image. I mean, alone by the size, you can see it's a bit smaller, but those are the vulnerabilities which we have. As you can see, we still have a couple of, but this is only because we can't fix something where a fix is not available. And maybe as a last example to kind of trying to transmit the message of why having a purposely built operating system and owning the OS as a basis for containers is important. Back then in September last year, there was an incident with Ingress Nginx. It was a critical exploitable vulnerability, which made everyone quite nervous. We fixed it in less than 24 hours, even before the official patch was available. The reason for that was, again, we can pump up dependencies. So big test, of course, if this will not break their pull But at the same time, in this particular example, we saw that there's a pull request at the project level available, and this pull request contained a potential fix. So we took this pull request, we tested it, if it patches the vulnerability, if it's not breaking the API by capability, and then rebuilt everything, containers and dependency, incorporated this temporary fix from our side, like kind of putting at the same time Ingress Nginx on our temporal fork. However, once the open source project decided that the pull request is okay and merged it, then we went and rebuilt everything again, and then putting everyone back on the main. But instead of days or weeks, we can do it in hours. And that's it from my side. Thank you very much.